Hello, folks. Welcome to another special Rangers review briefing. We're again speaking about Bundesliga things. I'm delighted to be joined by ESPN's lead Bundesliga commentator, and I believe the Bundesliga World feed as well, Mr. Derek Rae. Derek, thanks for joining us. You were speaking off air. You've enjoyed a little bit of a rest in the off season. Now you're cranking back up to a busy campaign again.
Yes, I think it's the same for all of us in this business, Joshua, right now. It's going to be a very busy season coming up. In my case, it's going to involve going to Qatar for the World Cup and, of course, working in Germany and working on the Bundesliga. So, yeah, we're taking the rest while we can, but given the way the transfer market is working at the moment, it's not a complete rest. So I live quite near the beach, quite near the seaside. So I often take my work things with me to the beach and work from there, which is not the worst situation in July, is it?
No, it sounds very nice. No such nice treats like that in central Glasgow, but not envious at all. Right, well, we're speaking, Derek, today specifically about Malik Tillman, who at the time of recording now, I should state, folks, this isn't being recorded live purely because it's going to be the weekend when it goes out. But speaking on Friday, we understand that Malik Tillman very close to arriving at Rangers on what will initially be a loan. There is discussions that there might be a buyback option involved in that as well. Do you want to just tell us, firstly, Derek, what the view is from Germany? I've seen in your Twitter feed this morning you had some information on that.
Yeah, the reporting initially came from the Scottish end here, and so clearly Rangers have had an interest. And it took a bit of time for this to become a story in Germany. And some of my colleagues today in Germany have been saying that this is now happening very fast. So I think that is how things have worked out. But what I can tell you is that Malik Tillman on Wednesday did train with Bayern, but not the whole session. Thursday, he didn't train at all. And there are reporters on the Zebener Strasse, the Bayern training HQ, on a daily basis. And they're always looking to see who's there and who's not. You know, it's one of the daily rituals. Okay, who's there, who's half training, who's full training, who's doing individual training. And it was noticed that something different was happening with Tillman, and of course you start putting two and two together. And so at the moment it's really a matter of what is cobbled together, if that's the right wording here, because there are different structures available, of course, for any deal. And if you look at some of the younger Bayern players of the recent past, it's often been a straight loan deal with no buy option, but of course it can be a loan deal with a buy option for the team that's taking the player, or it can also involve a buyback option for Bayern. Because one thing I will tell you about Bayern, and this probably is common sense for most people, as a big club and as a team in charge of its own transfer dealings, they always want to hold the cards. So they don't want to ever look bad and be in a situation whereby somebody says, well, why did you let that player go so easily? So they want to have that sort of trump card, if you like, to be able to play, should it come to a situation whereby they see him as very valuable. But as of right now, it's medical check as we speak now, and then let's see where it goes beyond that.
What was your initial reaction when you heard about the connection to Rangers, Derek? Because from the people I've spoken to from the Rangers end of things, other people involved within this, it certainly seems like this is a deal that the club are very excited about. I think it would be regarded as quite a coup, particularly if they are able to get some sort of loan to buy option, as you say, even if that does involve a bit of protection from Bayern. Were you surprised that it looked like he would be going up to Scotland instead of somewhere in England?
Not completely, because I think there are a number of big selling points for Rangers at the moment. And I will say, having been in Germany when Rangers played Eintracht Frankfurt in the final of the Europa League, there was respect for Rangers. And, I think just about every German wanted Eintracht to win that final, of course. And the view in Germany was they probably deserved to win it. I think there was a feeling that Rangers are a big name from the past and they have a certain tradition. And it won't have hurt, put it that way. It won't have hurt in terms of people thinking, okay, that's a place that might be quite good to go to. And knowing Ross Wilson, I think Ross is somebody who is very alive to what's happening in the wider European market. And, he keeps his own cards close to his chest for obvious reasons, but he's somebody who's very well connected. And he does keep his finger on the pulse when it comes to who might be available, who might be a fit, because that's what we're talking about here, aren't we? We're talking about not just signing a player, because you can go out and sign a player and say, okay, let's see where he fits. But, somebody like Ross is looking at what is the fit that's required for Rangers. Now, the interesting thing about Tillman, and we can talk about him, at length, we've got the time to do it. The interesting thing about him is there was kind of a debate at Bayern for a while as to who he was as a player, what was his best position. And he was called into the first team squad on a few occasions last season, mostly because of the COVID situation. I remember at the end of the calendar year, they were playing Wolfsburg. He was on the squad for that. He'd made a couple of cameo appearances in the Champions League. And then he played against Gladbach, a game that Bayern lost when they were down to bare bones. I mean, they could barely put together a team. Many thought that game should have been postponed. It wasn't. They lost 2-1. But at that point, he was almost seen as sort of the reserve to Lewandowski, because Bayern don't have an awful lot of reserves to Lewandowski for obvious reasons. Doesn't miss many games or hasn't as a Bayern player. Heavens knows what the future holds for him again as we speak now. But that's where Tillman was. But in talking to a lot of people, I think that he's more of a deeper player, maybe a second forward, maybe a playmaking type. I've even heard him referred to as somebody who could play on the wing. Versatile, somebody who's a good footballer. And so, for Rangers to be in that conversation, I think it speaks to the fact that they do have a very advanced scouting system, which, of course, as I've mentioned, Ross Wilson looks after from the highest offices of Rangers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get right into what type of player he is. As you say, I think a lot of people have been scrambling to kind of find out that information for themselves. I think the most reliable kind of quotes I've seen, and having watched a little bit of him, Tillman himself describes himself, his favourite position now maybe being off the striker, that number 10 position. I think he worked with Miroslav Klose at maybe Bayern under 17s who converted him. Nagelsmann's spoken a lot about his finishing quality. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about what that journey's been like for him to find that position and maybe what he offers as a player?
Yeah, a journey really is a good word, Joshua, when you think about the story here, because Bayern actually wanted to promote him a bit earlier, but there was a big problem in 2020, the start of that season, when he did his cruciate and missed that entire campaign. So last season was kind of his comeback season, and we wondered how it would go for him. You're right about Klose. To give the background, he originally comes from the Nuremberg area. He was brought up by his mother. His father, American, but to my knowledge, wasn't really part of the upbringing on a day-to-day basis. And he has a brother, Timothy Tillman, who was together with him in terms of development, who's been at Spielvereinigung Kräuter Fürth, team that got relegated from the Bundesliga at the end of last season, so playing in the Zweite Bundesliga, first weekend of the second Bundesliga this weekend. And so, somebody who has an ambition, somebody who is very talented, and had been playing for the Germany under 21s, and of course, and really was kind of a big part of the plans there. But of course, always I think had at the back of his mind that he could play for the USA because of his father. He's not actually spent time in the USA, but qualifies for the USA through his father. And I know from my own USA national team sources, they've been keeping tabs on him, hoping he might formally change his mind. A few months ago, he said no. He felt German more than anything, but players are pragmatic, aren't they? And it's a World Cup year, and he said recently that quite honestly, it would take him longer to get into the full German team reckoning than is the case with the USA. So, in terms of him as a footballer, it is interesting. Versatility is a strength. Nagelsmann, I listened to him very carefully in preparing for a game that I covered, Bayern Wolfsburg at the end of last season. And Nagelsmann at that time said that he liked a lot of what he brings. And what he stressed was that he's a combination player. You know, he's somebody who'll look to get on the ball. He'll try to work little 1-2s. He'll try to bring others into play. He'll try to get it back. He's that kind of player. You know, whether he's a dribbler, I'm not sure he's a natural dribbler, though he can play wide. But we see increasingly wingers these days who are not necessarily dribblers in the old, you know, Davy Cooper way of understanding that kind of position. The great Davy Cooper. So I think, you know, he's somebody who could play deeper. And I know Greg Berhalter, the coach of the US national team, who has watched him a lot, has said he thinks he could even be very deep, you know, as a sort of a central player in a 4-3-3, but would probably have to work on defensive aspects in order to be that player. He spoke more about number 10, or in his words, a pocket winger in a 4-3-3. So a number 10 maybe in a 4-2-3-1. That sort of idea. So multiple options. Nagelsmann has often spoken about his eye for goal, about the fact that he does have that and, you know, has played as a striker. The one thing that I think it is worth mentioning, and this is not a negative necessarily, it's just a personality trait. And again, I'm quoting Julian Nagelsmann here. He said he's a bit introverted. You know, he's a little bit quiet, but that can be a plus as well because he's quite clear-headed in his quietness. But he did say that's the one thing that we might want to try to improve is making him a little bit more of a leader, a little bit more self-confident. And, you know, he's 20. So, you know, we remember what we were all like at 20. And, you know, sometimes we improve on the confidence front as we move towards 30. So, So I think it's intriguing because, you know, he's somebody who has all these qualities. And, you know, if Rangers get him, and again, we're because we're talking early, we have to put the conditional if on it as we have this interview. If they get him, you know, they're getting a good one.
When you're speaking there about a player who, you know, maybe their finest attribute is goal scoring, arriving in the box, not necessarily a dribbler, something of an undefinable number 10, Thomas Müller kind of springs to mind maybe as that player within Bayern who I think he had a nickname as some sort of like space interpreter or space invader. Is that right?
Raumdeuter, interpreter of space. Yeah,
there we go. Right, I wouldn't have got that pronunciation. It's interesting. Certainly, I don't know how much aside from Rangers domestic football you've seen under Van Bronckhorst, given he's not been there that much or that long. But he certainly is, I'd say, a more direct coach than Steven Gerrard. He wants these players from midfield to be a goal scorers to contribute in that way, and I think that's what Tillman fits on the surface. And you're right in saying that. Clearly, from my point of view, covering the club this summer, you can see different types of player coming in and saying, okay, this is a bit of a squad recalibration, if you will, from Gerrard to Van Bronckhorst. And Tillman very much is that goal-scoring number 10, however you want to define it. Do you think he fits that mould as well in terms of wherever he starts, he wants to score goals? That's what Nagelsmann, when I've read quotes, sees as one of his, if not his best attribute.
Yes, definitely. And that's certainly what Bayern look for from their number 10s. And you've spoken about Thomas Müller. I mean, assists would be his thing more than goals nowadays at this point in his career. But of course, has a pretty good track record on the goal scoring front down the years as well. Jamal Musiala, great young player, you know, is coming through. And this is the problem. We should probably talk about this. People say, well, why would Bayern make a player like Tillman available if he's that good? And this is the problem, that you have Müller still, you know, contracted for the long haul. You have Jamal Musiala, who you have to try to get into the team, and his best position is number 10. But, you know, are you going to leave Thomas Müller out to bring in Musiala? So he ends up sometimes having to play in different positions. There are only so many occasions for that kind of adaptability within a top squad like Bayern. So what it means is, you know, a player like Tillman, who, you know, otherwise might be getting a look in or might be getting a chance, his prospects are a bit limited. You know, that's the way I see it at the moment, that as good as he is or might be, you know, and we don't really know how good he's going to be. The potential is yet to be properly realized, but as good as he is or might be, there's just not room there at Bayern. So I think the dynamic style is something that will suit him. I think a higher tempo of game will suit him. And I think he would be in good hands. And I think the other thing too is, you know, I was thinking about this and actually put a tweet out about it earlier. I think that playing in Glasgow, and this applies to Rangers or Celtic, in my opinion.
Sure.
Playing in Glasgow can make or break a player. You can find out an awful lot about a player's ability to deal with pressure based on time in Glasgow. Now, when you go there young, it is a stress test. I think that's absolutely the case. And, some people mock me when I say that because they say, oh, come on, Rangers, they win most of their games. They're not tested domestically. But, you know what I'm talking about here, Joshua.
Yeah.
Somebody who is from Scotland and worked in Scottish TV for a long time. The goldfish bowl is such that you have to have thick skin. You have to develop thick skin because, it's all very well saying you go to another club in another country and you have a nice life and you get paid quite well and you win most of your games, but you don't have the pressure that you have in Glasgow. So I do think that is something that could stand him in very good stead because Bayern's a bit similar in that sense. It's a one-club city. 1860 fans will hate me for saying that because they're on the doldrums at the moment. But it really is a one-club city, certainly compared to Glasgow. But the pressure cooker is there. And as I mentioned earlier, there are countless journalists who are at training every day and they're watching everything and they're reporting everything. And your movements are noticed in a place like that. But it's almost taken out, I think, to the nth degree with Rangers and with Celtic. And so this will be part of his development. And I feel for somebody who, as Nagelsmann has said, is maybe a little bit on the shy side, could be a good thing.
Yeah, well, that's actually an interesting point. I wanted to touch on that and say, if you're saying that about his personality, how will he cope? But I guess if you want to flip it the other way, if you've got a player here who's happy to leave the comfort of a big club because he wants to go and play, someone who has decided his international footballing journey early on, and that's a big decision having grown up in Germany, he does seem like he knows his own mind. So how do you think he will cope with that cooker pressure of Glasgow?
Well, I think it remains to be seen. I think that's the one kind of imponderable that's there. And we know there are some players who have dealt very well with it and others who haven't liked it at all. But I think from his point of view, he wants to play football and needs to play football. He's at the stage of his career where you could have another season where you're kind of on the fringes of Bayern, you're maybe playing for the second team, but is that where you want to be at 20? I don't think so. And I think Bayern realize that as well. That's the great thing about the club. They understand, and it's also selfish because they know that in time he may become an asset for them who they want to sell on permanently. Or he may be somebody who they want to look at for the first team squad. As I said, I doubt that at the moment. I would say that trajectory is doubtful. I think at Bayern, you have to have made that move a little bit earlier, like Musiala, who we spoke about. But that doesn't mean he's a bad player. You could name a pretty good team of Bayern players who haven't quite made it at Bayern, who have gone on to have success elsewhere. And so I think this would be, of benefit to Musiala on the
wouldn't mind him as well. That'll be fine.
To Tillman, who's pretty good, as I said, in his own right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, he looks like a physical player, which, he's going to face some robust challenges in Scotland. So if he can handle himself physically, that's good.
Yes, and I think that is the other thing. You do learn different aspects playing in Scottish football, and we sometimes don't stress them enough. But I think the lure of Europe will have been part of this too. I've no doubt about that because, obviously we don't know at the moment, Champions League or not for Rangers, but the Europa League in itself, I think, has increased its stature, and certainly in Germany because, don't need to tell you, you were part of it. Rangers obviously beating Dortmund and Leipzig before succumbing to Eintracht Frankfurt. And the Europa League was very much front and center, getting really good TV ratings in Germany last season, mostly because of Eintracht Frankfurt, who, like Rangers, are an old traditional club. And people have a fondness for Eintracht, even though you're not an Eintracht fan. They're not a team that's really hated by anybody. And so I think that is part of this story as well, if it all goes to plan.
Of course. Well, it won't see the light of day otherwise, so we're quite safe.
Finally,
Derek, I want to ask you about someone that signed for Rangers last week, a little bit more briefly. Robbie Matondo, obviously the kind of top line there is someone who went from the English academy system to Germany for a decent fee. I think he was 18 years old, 18, 19. Schalke, I was reading earlier this week, I've had I think 9 managers or 8 managers since 2018 or 2019. So a club that's had its time, should we say, these last few seasons. Can you give us an idea of again how he's viewed, what you think his potential is, maybe why it didn't work out for him at Schalke, and what you think he can achieve in the game, having seen a little bit of him?
Yeah, Robbie Matondo, when he first joined Schalke, the initial thing that struck me, and I think all of us who covered him, was that he had blistering pace, really fast, but his game awareness left a bit to be desired. Now, I will qualify this by saying he was playing for a Schalke team that really wasn't all that confident, and they've had their, I'm going to say, ups and downs. They've had more downs than ups, got themselves relegated, but they are back now. But I think I made a comment on Twitter about Matondo, which I think was slightly misinterpreted. I wasn't saying, that when I said that his game awareness needed work, I wasn't saying that means he's not a footballer. I just, think it's better to be honest that he has pace. He has some attributes, but he has others that need to be refined. And that's not completely odd for a player of that age. And Rangers are not necessarily going to get the finished article. They know that. They're going to get somebody who they can work on and from their point of view, hope that Gio van Bronckhorst can make him a better player. So I think with Matondo, what you have to look at is that Schalke are a team have been in turmoil for a while, financial problems there, cost cutting, selling players before they can bring in others. And he's somebody they don't really need or want at the moment. And a lot of that has to do with a high salary. Now, when I say a high salary, I mean a high salary for a young player who is unproven, And so, Schalke have not really seen him as somebody that they wanted to plan with this season. So they have moved him on. As I say, I think there's potential there, but fans probably need to know they're not getting the finished article. But somebody who can, I think, play on the right in Scotland probably will have a lot of success with his pace. But it's about, for me, whether he can improve his footballing level. And that's the difference between him and Tillman, who we were talking about earlier. Tillman is already, you can see, is a footballer. Matondo, could be a good footballer, but we don't quite know yet.
Interesting. Well, he's coming to, I guess, Rangers to do just that, as you say. Hopefully, in the club, I'm sure we'll look at the potential and what he can bring. They'll look at players like, someone like a Rebo who's just moved on, Calvin Bassey, the subject of a lot of attention, speaking today on Friday. But just finally, Derek, for all of the, I guess, the question marks that exist about him, he has that raw pace and raw ability that obviously attracted a German club to go at the age of 18, 19 and think this could work.
Yeah, and the one thing that I must stress is that I'm judging him based on what I've seen with Schalke. I have not seen him in Belgium. Now, I hear better things about what happened in Belgium, but they weren't better things that made Schalke think, we absolutely have to have him back. But as I said, there are financial considerations there as well. So I think that should be taken into account. And the number of players who have been written off and then have gone to a particular club that's been a fit for them, with a coach who's been a fit for them and have prospered, it's a very long list. So I certainly don't think anybody should write off Robbie Matondo, but I do think people should be aware of the backstory and where his strengths are and what the areas are that will need some concentration.
Absolutely. Well, Derek, thank you so much for that insight. That's really helpful. Plenty for our subscribers to get their teeth stuck into in terms of Robbie Matondo and hopefully Tillman as well. Malik Tillman coming into the club as we expect in the near future. Just tell us where we can find you on Twitter and socials if people don't already follow your work, Derek.
Yeah, if they want to look for me on Twitter, I'm at Raecom, Raecom. And I post a lot of German football information. And I know that there's a lot of interest in German football amongst Rangers fans, particularly a team in the north who I think, I was covering them at the end of last season in the playoff. They missed out, but we'll see if it's Hamburg's season to finally win promotion.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get another chat with you when we're speaking about Rangers' potential Champions League opponents later in the season. But we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you again, Derek, for your time.